What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. This is Feekim here with Zach Rizzuto. We are gonna get it popping. Week 6. It's Friday. What a weird game last night, dude. What a weird game. But
You
before we get
thought
into that, just wanna say we're gonna go over our wide receiver rankings. We're gonna go over our tight end rankings. We're gonna go over Thursday Night Football. That's what we're doing on this episode. All right, take it away,
yeah.
Zach.
You thought it couldn't get worse than last week between the Colts and the Broncos. Well, it just did. Granted, there was a touchdown scored. Was it 2 touchdowns? Yeah, 2 touchdowns scored, but the score looked very much the same as last week. 2 12-point winners in a row on Thursday Night Football. Just disgusting, really sloppy game. Actually, for fantasy, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. At least we had a couple of people that kind of showed up. The guys that we started, a couple of the guys that you probably started showed up. A couple of the guys that you probably started did not show up, and a couple of guys that nobody had on their roster showed up. Dante Pettis out of nowhere, but
And Darnell Mooney was on everyone's bench.
Yeah,
as he should have been.
And it wasn't some fantastic outing, but by the standard of this season, Darnell Mooney, that was like big time for him.
12 targets. 12
Right?
targets for Darnell Mooney. Justin Fields threw the ball 27 times.
Whoa.
He was averaging less than 18 pass attempts per game coming into this game, and he ends up throwing the ball more on Thursday Night Football. Like, I thought he was going to throw the ball like 9 times in this game.
Yeah.
He rushed for 88 yards too. And guess who started him last night against me?
Oh, yeah, that was me.
Yeah.
That was worse.
And of course,
yeah,
he had to come through with his best fantasy day. Of course. Who else did you start? Who else did you start against me, Zach?
Oh,
in your week of desperation, please.
Oh, yes, my week of complete desperation. I had Brian Robinson as my not my RB2, not my flex, my RB1 this week. Brian Robinson caps it with a nice touchdown at the end of the game to salvage the day, 12 points. It ended up being an all right evening for my team. It was great.
Oh my God.
It opened up much better. It could have gone much worse. I think this was best case scenario for my team. I got 31 points combined from 2 players in a game that only had 19 points. Was it 19 points scored? Yeah, total.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll
17
take it.
carries, 60 yards and a touchdown for Brian Robinson. If you have him, it's a good sign that he's like moving forward and taking this job over, basically.
Yeah.
Now, like, from a football perspective, like, he doesn't look great, and I kind of still don't understand why he's playing over Antonio Gibson. Maybe because of the fumbling. I have no idea. I still think Antonio Gibson's the better player. So I don't really see. I don't know what they're seeing in Brian Robinson, where they're like kind of forcing him the ball here. At this point, you gotta don't. I wouldn't assume that he's an RB2 next week or low in RB2. Like, I think he's still a flex play just because he only played on 47% of snaps. He ended up seeing a carry on 63% of his snaps, which is a little bit unsustainable. It means like whenever he was on the field, they're like pretty much going to give him the ball, which probably won't happen in most games. Like, they did choose to run the ball a lot. Like, Carson Wentz seemed like he was banged up. He couldn't get anything going. He only, I think he had less than 100 yards passing in
99,
this game.
I think it was.
Yeah, 99 yards passing in this game. So like they didn't throw the ball a lot. And they just chose to run the ball a ton because they knew that the Bears weren't going to score that much.
Right.
Justin Fields did have a couple of other opportunities to score in this game. He kind of overthrew a really, really slow tight end. And he ended up, giving it to Darnell Mooney at the end of the game, and Mooney couldn't really hold on to it in the end zone. And that would have been another touchdown for him, and he would have won the game. But that didn't happen.
Yeah, that would have put him at 23 points, which, I actually
I'm sure you already did those calculations.
Oh, yeah, I did the calculation 100%. But no, I had already went to sleep at that point, So I went to sleep just after the 40-yard touchdown by Justin Fields. It's like, all right, you know what? If I close my eyes and I wake up, maybe he'll have 30 points. So that was my hope. I don't know if you saw that. Was a points bet actually cashed out under bets at halftime. Because the game was so slow. So it's like I was hoping there would be a nice, change, just to make points bet sweat a little bit with having
points bet also wanted to go to sleep. They were just like, can we just do this now? It was like a guy sitting on his computer cashing out all the bets and he's just like, all right, well, can I just do this now? I just want to go to bed.
Yeah.
All right, that's enough about that game. You guys had to watch that game, and now you have to listen to a review of that game. All right, I think we're done there.
I'd argue the review was much more entertaining.
I would say so.
Unless you had Justin Fields and Brian Robinson as your starters this week.
Yeah, and if you had Curtis Samuel like me, wasn't really a great day.
Just one more note on that. Curtis Samuel really came through dropping that 35-yard touchdown. I mean, it hit him right in the hands. Carson Wentz, he didn't throw much, but maybe that's why. The receivers, actually, Curtis Samuel had a couple drops. He had at least 2 that I saw, both in the first half. Both would have been nice gains. Really bailed me out so far to give me a shot this week. I mean, I'm still I had a decent night anyway, and I'm still favored to lose the game. So that's never good. But Curtis Samuel, he got the targets, he just didn't do anything with them.
It's unfortunate, and it's also unfortunate that Terry McLaurin couldn't come through as well. But that's what we've been seeing all season long. Yeah. All right, well, let's get into some news. Teddy Bridgewater, he's still in the concussion protocol. I imagine there's a chance he can play, but it doesn't seem super positive right now. I'm still playing Tyreek Hill. I'm still playing Jalen Waddle, hoping that they can have some production. But, it's going to be hard for me to put those guys on my bench despite the quarterback issues that they're having. If it's Teddy Bridgewater, right, I'm happy. But if it's not, if it's who is it? Skylar
Thompson. Yeah.
Yeah. That tells you all you need to know.
He was lighting it up a little bit in the preseason. They were playing. He actually didn't look that bad, but granted, that was against preseason defenses and that. He didn't look very good last week against the Jets defense. I don't envision that getting any better, in the future, at least not this season. You just got to hope for Teddy Bridgewater and Tua to be back, one of those two at least. And like I said earlier this week, it could be rough riding for Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. So keep an eye on how they do this weekend, because they might be buy lows and people tend to get a little disenchanted with the way they perform this next week, and maybe even the week after.
Especially Jalen Waddle, because if he doesn't have a good game this week, that's like a string of games where he's underperformed, where he just went apeshit, in the first couple of weeks, and then after that, there wasn't much on the stat sheet. So you definitely wouldn't want to buy him low if that's the case. Now, it's possible that Wan'Dale Robinson is back this week for the Giants. He's been limited in practice all week. So if he's available on your waiver wire and you could use some wide receiver help, I would add him. He's a prospective add. I wouldn't necessarily play him because you want to see what that snap count looks like and whether he'll re-aggravate whatever injury he had. He's all the Giants have at this point, and he's a second-round pick. They had big plans for him coming into the year, but he ended up having that injury that hasn't allowed him to play at all. So with the Giants having no receivers, he can come right in and get a bunch of targets. So somebody that you could potentially add on waivers before Sunday.
Yeah, and we talked about Wan'Dale a lot this offseason, and there's not really much else to say, besides what you said. We have to see how the target share and split's going to work out in the Giants offense. They haven't been very pass heavy. They've been Saquon heavy, and that's about it. You don't really want to be starting many Giants receivers, especially now. Sterling Shepard was the guy, to start. If you're going to start anybody, it was him. He was the target share guy getting it. But he's down and out for the season. So at this point, I see David still sitting on a bunch of waiver wires thinking, oh, maybe I'll pick him up. I was actually thinking about taking him this week because my bench has a couple openings, and I just can't bring myself to do it. They don't throw it enough. And Daniel Jones, I don't trust him as a passer to produce too many fantasy relevant finishes for pass catchers there.
I think you should do it. I don't know. That's just my opinion. Michael Thomas is not practicing yet. Jarvis Landry is not practicing yet. Chris Olave has a chance to play. He's making good strides in the concussion protocol. So there's a chance that he does play. We mentioned that he doesn't really have much of a concussion history, so it is possible. He did join a limited practice on Thursday, and on Friday, if he gets upgraded, that'll be awesome, and he will end up playing. If he does play, he should be in your lineups. It also looks like James Conner is going to miss this week. Dal Williams is already out. Benjamin is going to be a great play. And that report of James Conner being out is from Aaron Wilson, NFL Insider, and so it looks like he is going to be out this week. Raheem Mostert, he said he's fine. We mentioned in yesterday's podcast that he didn't practice on Wednesday. He's back at practice. He was back at practice yesterday on Thursday, so he should be good to go. So I would start him as a solid RB2. Two guys that are back in practice, Jonathan Taylor and Kyle Pitts. They both should be good to go this week. Jonathan Taylor's in your lineup. Kyle Pitts is up to you. It's up to you what you want to do with Kyle Pitts. He could be in your lineup or not. Doesn't matter. Same points.
Yeah.
All right, so let's
Same
move
points.
on. Let's
I
move
just
on
realized you
to.
just had to slide that one in there. I see what
I
you're
had to.
doing.
I had to.
Yeah,
Let's move
100%.
on to a wide receiver rankings, man. Let's do it. Let's do it. We got Cooper Kupp here at number 1. The Panthers, they run some of the most zone coverage in the league, and finding that zone is Kupp's specialty. That also helps. It also helps that Miles Hartfield and the Panthers have given up the 5th most fantasy points to slot wide receivers this year. Not that it matters for Cooper Kupp, but figured you already started him, but you want to hear something about Cooper Kupp sometimes. I get it.
Yeah.
Stephon Diggs, he can go off this week against Kansas City in a shootout. The Chiefs have already given up the most fantasy points to perimeter wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. So obviously good for him. Also good for Gabe Davis, another guy that you have going up against me this week. This is gonna. I'm just trying to like build up the drama for this matchup this week, as you can see. And everyone's gonna want to know what happens. And
I have a feeling we're headed for an ugly finish on my end, but we'll see.
We'll see. We have Justin Jefferson here at 3. Xavier Howard, he did come back to a limited practice on Thursday. He ended up leaving. I think he left last week's game in the middle of the game with that groin. But it's possible that he does play this week, but he is dealing with that groin injury. Either way, Justin Jefferson's in your lineup. At 4, we have Marquise Brown. He made a little bit of a jump here. He got it done in a tough matchup against Philly last week, which showed me a lot, to be honest with you. Like, he was matched up with Darius Slay a ton, and the fact that he was able to do what he did last week, all right, Marquise Brown, you the man. He's the overall fantasy wide receiver 6 right now. You got to assume he continues to get it done in what should be a high-scoring matchup against Seattle.
Yeah, and we talked about, Marquise Brown kind of being that guy. And we talked about at length, was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday or the day before. But Marquise Brown, definitely, a start. I have him probably as a top 5 too, especially with a bunch of guys out on bye. Amon St. Brown's out on bye, Devontae Adams is out on bye. It might seem like he's a little bit high this week, but that's because, there's a bunch of guys ahead of him that are out. I like Marquise Brown against Seattle. We talked about this matchup and how it has a chance to produce a bunch of points on yesterday's episode. This one's pretty easy for me. The target share that he's getting and the production that he's putting up, and like you said, against quality competition and guys like Darius Slay and even James Bradbury a little bit. I think that Marquise Brown, he's definitely someone to watch. And you're very happy if you drafted him because he's returning on investment big time. I wouldn't be too worried either. It's worth noting about DeAndre Hopkins coming back. He's going to be a big part of this offense, regardless of who's lined up opposite him at the line of scrimmage.
I saw a really interesting take from Adam Levitan and Evan Silva on, they're on the Established to Run podcast, and they run that whole show there. They're great, by the way. Definitely recommend their podcast. They mentioned that, like, this might be a good time to sell DeAndre Hopkins. Like, even though that you've been holding him this entire time, there's a lot of anticipation, for his return. And when people need a wide receiver, they assume that they're going to get like this high-end wide receiver 1 or something like that, when he does return. And it's like, all right, well, why not take advantage of that anticipation and maybe get some more value than you would have rather than just playing DeAndre Hopkins? Because it's very possible that Hopkins is just like a wide receiver too, right? And, especially with Marquise Brown there. And like, is there a chance that Marquise Brown ends up out-targeting DeAndre Hopkins in some games? I think there's a chance. And when you look 100%. At it at the end of the season, look at the end when you fast forward to the end of the season and you look at the numbers and you're like, oh, Hollywood Brown had a higher target share than DeAndre Hopkins this year when they played together. Like, I wouldn't be surprised with that either, because DeAndre Hopkins was not a high target share player last year.
Yeah.
Right. So, something to think about. It's very interesting points made by those guys.
Of course, at this point, it's speculation. We're still waiting on Hopkins to return, but I think it's hard to say that, DeAndre Hopkins coming back after missing the first 6 games is going to, just immediately supplant Marquise Brown as wide receiver 1. I wouldn't be surprised, if Marquise Brown continues to have, the wide receiver 1 share of the work for a few weeks. And I wouldn't be surprised, like you said, if it kind of continues throughout the rest of the season. I'm not saying that DeAndre Hopkins is going to be relegated to, an insignificant role, but I think both of them are good enough. I think Marquise Brown has shown enough and that he's good enough. Not that there were questions about it before, that he's going to be a part of any offense and that he's capable of being the wide receiver 1 on an offense, even with DeAndre Hopkins, there.
Yeah. And he's done it on 2 teams at this point. He's proved that to be the number 1 in Baltimore, and he's doing it here too. Mike Evans at number 5. He's going up against a Pittsburgh defense, giving up the most fantasy points to wide receivers, the second most to perimeter wide receivers. And the Bills showed us what's possible last week. But it was happening before they went to Buffalo, to be honest with you. Like Jamar Chase, Nelson Aguilar, okay?
Yeah.
Jacoby Myers, Amari Cooper, Corey Davis. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like all these guys had big games against the Steelers. So Mike Evans is going to blow it up this week.
Absolutely. And this is one of the easiest starts of the week. It's not like someone that's like, oh yeah, this one's a slam dunk start. You're pretty much putting Mike Evans in your lineup every week. It's not like you're going to have a question about that. But this one, it just screams perfect fantasy situation. I mean, Tom Brady's going to tear up the Pittsburgh secondary, just like every other quarterback has. If Zach Wilson can do it, and no shade at Zach Wilson, if Zach Wilson could do it, imagine what Tom Brady's going to do with Mike Evans and even Chris Godwin.
Yeah, man. I mean, you could never throw shade at Zach Wilson, man. Like we got to get some memes up with you and Zach Wilson, dude. We got to somebody do something, please. Like, if you listen to this, if you watch this on YouTube, please, like, let's get Zach and Zach Wilson. Let's get like some sort of meme going with these two faces somewhere, somehow. Like, I'm not good at this stuff, but like, I know someone will.
Let's get Zach Wilson on the show. How about that? The podcast. We'll see how that goes.
That works too. That works too.
Yeah,
but I'm just curious if someone puts Zach like this Zach Rizzuto in like on Zach Wilson's body, like with the Jets uniform. Can anyone tell the difference? Like I really want to know.
Are you saying I look like Zach Wilson? I don't see it at all.
Yes, you definitely look like Zach Wilson.
All right, we got to put up like a poll on your Instagram story or something.
We'll do it. We'll do it. First of all, someone needs to do this. Just send me, a picture of Zach on Zach Wilson's uniform body. And then we'll just post, like, hey, can you guys tell the difference? Yes or no? All right. Anyway, moving on. I don't think you're a big fan of that topic.
I don't care. It's fine. I just personally don't see it, but that's just me.
That would be hilarious. It would be hilarious if people were just like, yeah, he looks exactly like him. You're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Let's see. I got Tyreek Hill at 6 here. He's dealing with a foot injury, but he should play. We'll see who ends up playing quarterback for them this week. But either way, I think, Hill can get it done with any quarterback. He got it done with Alex Smith, for God's sakes. But I'm not overthinking it when it comes to whether he's in my lineup or not. We saw that he was able to be just fine with Teddy. The hope is that Teddy can progress. That might be wishful thinking at this point, but either way, he'll be in your lineup. Hill is followed by AJ Brown, CeeDee Lamb at number 8. CeeDee should avoid Darius Slay on most of his routes, given that he's been running out of the slot a ton since Michael Gallup has been back. And Slay has only like less than a handful of snaps defending the slot this year. He's going to stay on the perimeter. So he's going to be CeeDee Lamb is going to be able to run a ton of routes, not in Darius Slay's coverage. So that sounds like that he can have a pretty good game this year.
Yeah, I feel like it has
this week.
To be.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
this week. Sorry.
Yeah,
this year too. This year too. I mean, he is
leading
the NFL with 34% target share and 82% weighted opportunity. He's number 1 in the NFL. So hey, pretty good this year as well.
Definitely. Well, CeeDee Lamb. A lot of people are going to point at the Cowboys and be like, "Well, they're running the ball a lot," and it's true that they are. They did that a lot last week against the Rams, but that's mainly because they didn't have to do any really offensive production at all. They went up from literally the third play. They got a defensive touchdown, and they just sat back and let the defense do their thing, ran the ball, and chewed the clock out the rest of the game. We've seen Cooper Rush. He can throw the ball, and when he does throw the ball, he targets CeeDee Lamb a lot. Even with, the Cowboys being run heavy last week, CeeDee Lamb still got a pretty decent amount of targets. So I think this one's going to be a little bit closer. There's going to be a little bit more scoring done. I think Dallas is going to have to rely on its offense a little bit more because Dallas' defense is good, but the Eagles' offense is also very good. So I like 7 and 8, AJ Brown and CeeDee Lamb back to back. Rankings wise, and also just because they're right next to each other, it's the matchup. But I don't think there's any reason to think that CeeDee Lamb can't have a good game here. I wouldn't be surprised if he got double-digit targets again, especially if Dallas has to keep up, and they would happen to get down.
Exactly. I mean, Philly is favored in this game, and Dallas can be at it. Like last week, they didn't have to run any pass plays at all, right? Like they basically they had played very good defense against an inferior team, and then just ran the ball. That's all they had to do.
Mm-hmm.
Cooper Rush didn't have to run a whole lot. I'm sorry, have to pass a whole lot. But CeeDee Lamb still ended up with I think he ended up with a 30+ target share, if I'm not mistaken, even last week.
Granted, that
more
was,
than,
it might look a little inflated because he only threw 16 passes. I think it
exactly.
was. So it might seem a little bit inflated, but still, when the ball is coming out, it's going CeeDee Lamb's way. It's worth, noting.
Tyler Lockett is at number 9 here. I have DK at 10. Lockett is the overall fantasy wide receiver 8 right now. Okay, he's balling, especially over the last 3 weeks. You got to play him as a wide receiver 1 right now, meaning he has to be in your lineup. The number 2 wide receivers have been doing their thing against Arizona this year, and this over-under this week is set at 50.5. So he did pop up on the injury report with a hamstring and was limited on Thursday. So keep an eye on that. And his practice status today. Like, hopefully he didn't tweak something in practice because that would suck. But it's possible that maybe he just had a little bit of rest. Who knows? But keep an eye on his Friday practice status for sure.
Yeah, and I have a question for you. If Tyler Lockett doesn't go, how much of a boost does DK Metcalf get?
I think it becomes a little tougher for DK Metcalf, to be honest with you. Like, he's
going down.
We've seen this. I don't know if he's going down. Like, I'll leave him here. I'll probably bump him up to number 9. But it's like it's tough because in one situation, like, oh, he's gonna get all the targets, and then in another situation, you're like, well, that just makes things easier for Arizona to be able to double him on more plays. When you have Tyler Lockett on the other side, the defense has to pick their poison, and Geno Smith has been finding the open guy, right? Over the past several weeks. So, now if Arizona has already been good at taking away the number 1 wide receiver. So if Tyler Lockett is not on the field, then that might not be a great game for DK Metcalf. He's still going to be in my lineup, but I'm not overly optimistic for him to just blow up.
Yeah, just ask AJ Brown last week how things
went.
Exactly.
Exactly. And who ended up doing well? DeVonta Smith.
Yeah, right.
DeVonta Smith had 10 targets in that game.
Dallas Goedert. So
yes, exactly.
If you're looking at tight ends, they allowed a lot of points to tight ends. Maybe Will Dissly becomes somebody you want to start. I don't think he's a top 10 tight end this week, but in a pinch, that's if Tyler Lockett's out, I think. But obviously that changes with Tyler Lockett playing. But this is all just speculative. If anything would happen with Tyler Lockett, hopefully he plays.
And plus, like anybody catching the ball from Geno Smith, you want him in your lineup.
Yeah, and who would have thought we'd be saying that? Not only are we saying that this season, but we're saying it this far into the season. We're heading into week 6, and Geno Smith is looking like one of the premier quarterbacks as of so far this season. It's one thing if you're coming out, you're saying after week 1, oh yeah, man, Geno Smith looked good. Maybe there's something there. No, this has been 6 weeks. He's looking pretty good, pretty unbelievable if you ask me.
Yeah, man. All right, let's move on to number 11 here. Ja'Marr Chase. Potential shadow situation here with Marshawn Lattimore. But the Saints haven't been amazing defending perimeter wide receivers anyway. They've given up the 5th most fantasy points to perimeter wide receivers this year, and we saw what Seattle was able to do against them last week. So let's hope that Ja'Marr can get to his ways this week. T. Higgins is banged up still. He hasn't practiced yet. I have him somewhere. It looks like I have him outside the top 20, and that's because of the injury. Right. Yeah. Last week, it seems like T. Higgins did end up aggravating that ankle injury, which is why he only played a handful of snaps. So that sucked because a lot of people had him in the lineups and was and we're depending on him to play and put up some points. But either way, Ja'Marr Chase, I have him all the way down to 11 now, man. This is the lowest he's been all season long. He hasn't been on this second page all season long. But at this point, this offense hasn't been clicking, and he hasn't been putting up these big fantasy days. He's had a solid floor, but we thought the floor was going to be a lot higher.
Well, the thing about Ja'Marr Chase is that the underlying usage is still there. It's not like it's going away. They're throwing him the ball. He's just been not as efficient, as he was last season, or as explosive maybe. That could be due to a variety of things. T. Higgins wasn't there last week, or hardly there last week, and he still didn't, have a fantastic game. I'm looking at his yards per catch has gone way down from last season to this season, and we've talked about how the Bengals offense just does not look the same as it did last season. They're obviously in a bit of a slump right now, sitting at 2-3. That could easily turn around. This is still the same team, on paper that we saw last season with arguably a better offensive line, but that hasn't necessarily been the case. We talked about buy low. this week, you know, Jamar Chase, I feel like is a guy that you can go for. I mean,
I agree. I mean, he's still getting 28% target share on the season, 35% air yards on the season. It's still looking the underlying metrics are still looking good.
Yeah, and it's not even you don't have to look far. Like just look at his targets. You know how they give you those stats in Sleeper, that big block that shows all the numbers right there. Like he's only had one game with 6 targets. Every other game he's had 9+. He topped out at 16 in week 1, and that's when he went off against Pittsburgh. I don't see how. You know, it doesn't really make sense how he's underproducing so badly. I think this is going to even out. And we talk about it all the time, or at least I talk about it all the time. Underlying usage will eventually translate to production. It's got to happen at some point. He's had with 3 straight 12-point performances. If I'm right.
You know what I mean. You know, you think about it and how he produced last year, right? And it was really a lot of over the top stuff,
Yeah.
right? And you know, have we seen him be a guy to be a volume monster on the intermediate routes? Not really, you know,
Yeah.
not yet. You know, so that's something that you know we haven't seen yet from Jamar Chase, and that's something that you know I would love to see more of in his game because you know a lot of these teams are playing you know too you know shell coverage, they're playing too high, and if they're doing that, then you know they're kind of taking away that deep bomb, right? And we haven't seen much of that this year. Like that's all we were seeing last year
Right.
between these two guys, right? Between Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. So we haven't seen it much this year. Hopefully we end up seeing it at some point, but they got to figure it out. They got to be more creative. They got to put Jamar Chase in the slot a little bit. They got to move him around. They got to do more with Jamar Chase. And honestly, any sort of underproduction from Jamar Chase is you got to put that squarely on their head coach Zach Taylor's hands. You know, he has to come up with something to scheme him up.
Yeah. Bottom line.
Anyway, moving on. Courtland Sutton.
Another guy with a bad head coach.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I mean, honestly, they've schemed Courtland Sutton better than Jamar Chase. Honestly, like if I'm looking at it, like they've schemed him up way better. And he's been extremely consistent this year. He hasn't let you down once. He's at 12 here in my rankings, and he also happens to be the wide receiver 12 on the year.
So we must be doing something right. You know, I like Courtland Sutton. Definitely 100%. The way that he's been playing, he hasn't left you out to dry at all this whole season, like you said. I think he has a pretty good matchup against the Chargers. It is prime time, and we've seen that the Broncos have kind of struggled a little bit, you know, and by a little bit we mean a lot. But the offense hasn't looked the same. But the one constant, you know, is Russell Wilson continues to look for Courtland Sutton. If you watch the game, I think it was against the Colts. Russell Wilson. They might not necessarily go down his targets. A couple plays where he was targeting Courtland Sutton, if I remember, were called back by penalty. And then a couple of them he was just like super errant on, which I don't even know if it registers as a target when he's super errant. But he's throwing deep. He's throwing often to Courtland Sutton. There's all kinds of underlying usage that we'd like to see for Courtland Sutton. We just need to see the production get there. I like Courtland Sutton. I've liked him this whole season. I know a bunch of people in the fantasy community were hoping for a little bit better from him, but at least he's not, you know, a dud for you week in and week out like other receivers. He might not be reaching his ceiling, but he's definitely not screwing your team over on a weekly basis.
He hasn't reached his ceiling yet, which is a good thing, honestly. I mean, this offense looks like complete crap over the first several weeks of the season, and he's still producing, which is great. Right. That's what you want to see because he's good. He's a good player.
Definitely.
We have Debo here at 13, Jalen Waddle at 14. Good matchup for him, but we're just hoping that you know the quarterback can find him. Chris Olave here at 15, assuming that he can clear concussion protocol. Amari Cooper at 16, followed by Christian Kirk. The Jags already went up against Indy, and Kirk came through, catching all 6 of his targets for 78 yards and 2 touchdowns. Indy has been relatively stout against the wide receivers. You know, only a couple wide receivers were able to do this thing. Christian Kirk being one of them, Courtland Sutton being another. But we'll see if we can do it again.
Yeah, I think Christian Kirk has it in him. It's for me, it's not a question about Christian Kirk. It's a question about Trevor Lawrence, and I've talked about this at length many times. Trevor Lawrence looked much better in week 2 than he has in these past few weeks. Since that week 2 performance, he's really kind of just fallen off a cliff with his turnover making. He's causing a lot of turnovers himself, and that's really hurting the Jags offense as a whole. Maybe they can get right back on the horse, you know, start throwing to Christian Kirk again like they did against Indianapolis and have a good game again to get back on track. I wouldn't put it past them. You know, the Jaguars defense was able to fluster Matt Ryan a little bit in that week 2 matchup, which resulted in more opportunities for the Jaguars offense to get back on the field. This seems like an optimal spot for a get right game.
Yeah, I mean, last week the Texans really switched things up defensively against the Jaguars, which probably confused the shit out of Trevor Lawrence and his preparation, because coming into that game, they were playing zone. The Colts were playing zone. The Texans were playing zone on 40% of plays the 3 weeks prior to that game. And then they went almost 100% zone last week against Trevor Lawrence. So,
Yeah.
He probably was like, yo, what is this? Right? This is not what I prepared for. All week you're preparing for one thing, right? And for them to play a certain way. And then all of a sudden the Texans were like, nope, this is how we're going to play. And then, he got frustrated, and it made sense. He didn't look good at all. He looked confused out there. So they really kind of switched things up on him, and that's probably why he didn't have a good game. But the Colts, they're a little bit more consistent. So hopefully this, in terms of like what they've been playing every single week in terms of zone. So hopefully this week he can bounce back. But still tough matchup overall for wide receivers so far.
Yeah, definitely. And before
moving on,
go
ahead.
We move on, we kind of just glossed over Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, and Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper is a guy. Just a stat that I saw, and that's notable to me. It's kind of an issue that's followed Amari Cooper around anywhere he's gone. At home, he averages 22 points a game. Away, he averaged 3 points a game. He has a tough matchup in New England coming in. I'm interested to see how that plays out, because he is at home, and obviously there's not too much weight carried with that statistic, but it is, like I said, worth noting. That's been the one way we could kind of explain his up and down production. I think that Amari Cooper is a good start this week. I just, I would temper expectations a little bit with New England coming to town. That's just one thing.
I mean, maybe he has to feel all warm and fuzzy inside in order for him to play well. Maybe that's what it is. Like, he has to be able to smell like home cooked meal or something like that. Like, he has to,
see Brownie the elf at midfield.
He has to give a hug and kiss to his loved ones, before the game and stuff. And if they're not there, maybe he just doesn't feel as good. Right. But last week, Josh Reynolds, 6 for 92, right? The week before, Romeo Doubs, 5 for 47 and a touchdown. Allen 16. There's a chance that he can do his thing. Diontae Johnson with Mitch Trubisky, 6 for 57, which, for a regular receiver and quarterback would have been, 9 for 148, right? So I kind of feel like, he'll be fine this week, but like you said, he needs to feel all warm and fuzzy inside. So it's very possible that he doesn't end up doing his thing. But I'm still starting him. He's in my lineup.
Definitely.
DeVonta Smith, in the top 20 at number 18, he runs more than 70% of his routes away from Trevon Diggs' side. So I think he will benefit from a ton of targets in this game, similar to what happened last week. And we just talked about that. And those two spots where he lines up from on most of his routes, which is the right perimeter and the slot, those two spots happen to be very vulnerable to fantasy points this season from the Cowboys. So Trevon Diggs' side, amazing in coverage.
Sorry, you cut out a little bit there at the end. I didn't hear what you said. Trevon Diggs' side is what?
Trevon Diggs' side, he basically locks that up, right? Yeah. And then everywhere else, not so great.
Yeah, no, I hear you. That's true. And DeVonta Smith, like I said, I talked about this a little bit, and was it a couple episodes ago? DeVonta Smith has kind of been like a surprise favorite target for Jalen Hurts. The first season that they really played together the whole season was last season in 2021, and he didn't really jump off the stat sheet anytime. He wasn't much of a fantasy asset. But this year with A.J. Brown, maybe drawing some coverage, he's been able to take advantage of the matchups that he's been getting. And, he looks really good. And I said he's been able to play in ways that we didn't really anticipate him to be able to play. Watching him moss guys was really weird, being 6 foot 170. I took him as a route runner with a little bit of speed. He's looks like the whole package for the Eagles. A very good receiver, guaranteed. I think that this week, he's in for a pretty good game again, because A.J. Brown's probably, like you said, I'm not sure if Trevon Diggs is going to shadow him, but he's going to see majority of snaps against him. And outside of the one big play, and that's been Trevon Diggs' kryptonite. Outside of the one big play last week, Cooper Kupp was relatively quiet. He caught a couple passes, but if you take away that production, he would have been, I think, outside the top 12.
It's possible, yeah. And looking at Chris Godwin, number 19, I mentioned this with Mike Evans. This is a great matchup for Tampa wide receivers. So Chris Godwin, very solid play. Now, he's had relatively modest games since his return. But I feel like he's going to continually improve, get his feet under him, coming off the hamstring injury, but also coming off that ACL, right? Tampa has allowed, I'm sorry, not Tampa, Pittsburgh has allowed the 4th most fantasy points to slot wide receivers this year. So, Chris Godwin has another chance to pop off and have his breakout, 2022 game.
Yeah, and this is a spot to have it, like we said about Mike Evans earlier, and I kind of alluded to Chris Godwin. With Tom Brady at quarterback, you're going to be just fine, but this is a matchup that is, good for everybody on the Buccaneers offense. I'd look more for the passing game players to be involved, have better games outings this week than the guys like Leonard Fournette, Rashad White. But, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. I think Chris Godwin, if he could get his hands on a touchdown grab, he'll be a really nice start for you this week. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes through with like a solid. You think it happens? He gets in the end zone. If he goes like 8 for 80 and a touchdown, I think that would be nice to see. I think that's well within his range of outcomes
for sure. And that's what we're looking for. Honestly, if he caught a touchdown in either of the last 2 games, he would have been probably like a top 15 finish.
Yeah.
I have Keenan Allen here at 20. He's back in practice. He's getting in limited sessions. Unfortunately, I have a feeling that he'll be a game day decision, and the Chargers play Denver on Monday night. So, number one, it's a tough matchup, right? But it's Keenan Allen. I know if I know that he's going to be playing, I'm going to have him in my lineup. But him playing on Monday night obviously complicates things. So, I know I'm going to get a whole lot of questions between now and Sunday saying like, hey, should I wait on Keenan Allen or should I play this guy? I would say, like, if we have no information on Keenan, unless Keenan Allen gets a full practice today on Friday, which I doubt he will. Saturday also, remember, this is a Monday night game. So instead of looking at Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, you got to look at Thursday, Friday, and Saturday for the practices. So if he gets a full in, you kind of have some fairly good confidence that he's going to play. So I would wait on it. If he continues to get limiteds in and they're going to call him a game time decision and you're truly not going to find out on Monday, if you have a good option on Sunday, like I'd probably just play the good option, because is it possible that he plays a limited snap count? Probably. Is it possible that he comes in and aggravates? Possibly. Is it possible that he just doesn't play? Yeah. So it's a couple, scenarios here where can he come out and have a great game? Sure. But this is a tough defense too. So it's like you have a few reasons that you have a few reasons here to say like, all right, you know what? I have a good option here in, I don't know, pick a guy. Good
option. How about would like a Brandon Ayuk qualify for that?
No. I don't think so.
That's the thing. That's where I was drawing the line. I was going to say, like, for example, if you have
Isaiah
McKenzie,
these type of guys, like I would just play those guys, over Keenan Allen. But maybe Isaiah McKenzie is too good of an option. Maybe. I don't know. Rondale Moore, guys like that, like I would play over Keenan Allen if I didn't know that he was going to be playing.
If you had to, I don't want to say bet, but what's your gut feeling with Keenan Allen? You think he's going to play?
I think he's going to play. Yeah, I think he's going to play.
I think he's going to play too.
Yeah. I think he's going to play.
I think I would end up giving my vote of confidence to Keenan Allen that he's going to play and leave him in. I mean, unless you really have a standout play behind him, I think I'm leaving Keenan Allen in.
Okay. Cool. So let's hope that he plays this week. I know I've been waiting for him for the longest.
Yeah.
In a couple leagues.
Well,
but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I had Curtis Samuel at 21. That didn't work out so great. I mean, he's not top 15, but still, we talked about it already. I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
Mike Williams at 22. Who are you playing this week? You playing Mike Williams or Keenan Allen? Obviously, you probably don't have both, but if you had to rank one above the other, would you have Mike Williams ahead of Keenan Allen this week?
No, I'd put Keenan Allen ahead of him because when Keenan Allen's on the field, we see Mike Williams kind of do the disappearing act. He doesn't, catch many passes. If he does catch a pass, it's probably a deep pass. He turns into almost like the guy that we have ranked beneath him, like a Gabe Davis, I think.
I was thinking the same thing.
When you have Keenan Allen on the field.
I have Gabe Davis at 23 here. I have him ahead of Michael Pittman, one spot ahead of Michael Pittman. Pittman's matchup isn't amazing. The Jaguars have defended wide receivers pretty well, and Pittman can still get it done, and he'll be in my lineup. But Gabe Davis against Kansas City, it's just tough not to have him in the lineup, especially after last week. Kansas City has given up the most fantasy points to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks, and this is going to be a shootout, and this is Josh Allen here, right? So they
Yeah.
already have been given up the most fantasy points to wide receivers over the last 4 weeks. Now you got Josh Allen coming in, you got Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis and Isaiah McKenzie, all these guys coming in. Now,
Yeah.
it's a situation where like, Gabe Davis just went off last week. You
And
probably want to put him in your lineup this week.
yeah, definitely. And you have to remember, Gabe Davis is now revisiting the team that put him on the fantasy map for the season. The team that he owes probably most of his fantasy notoriety to for this season. And he capitalized on it last week. But this is, the Chiefs and the Bills. Like I said, the matchup everyone had circled on their calendar going into the season. It's hard to envision Gabe Davis not getting at least a few looks. I think his volume might be a little bit more pronounced this week than in other weeks, just because I don't think this is going to be a tough game to get through offensively. I think they're going to be throwing the ball. And it's going to be high scoring, like you said. This is like that territory where it's just like start everybody. You have the matchup that works. It's just that's what you do. Gabe Davis, even though he is a bit of a home run hitter, he can be a little bit inconsistent. The upside in this one is massive, as we saw in the playoffs last season and last week. He's always liable to have that type of game. And that's why I have trouble keeping out of my lineup, even after a bunch of down weeks.
For sure. So we have Michael Pittman at 24, T. Higgins at 25. And again, I have him this low because he's dealing with an ankle injury. Apparently, he aggravated it last week in that game, and he's yet to practice this week. So just keep an eye on him and his practice status on Friday. If he does play, like I probably will play him, like after I saw what the Seahawks were able to do against New Orleans. So he'll probably be in my lineup. And, him being at 25 only has to do with the fact that he's a little bit banged up right now. Otherwise, he'll probably be in the teens somewhere.
Yeah.
Let's see. I had McLaurin at 26, Diontae Johnson at 27. He runs most of his routes against Jamel. He's going to run most of his routes against Jamel Dean on the left side, but he does move around a bit. And everywhere else, the Bucs seem to be pretty vulnerable to fantasy points. So there's a chance that he does have a good game. I assume that he's going to get his targets, 4 double-digit targets in 5 games this year. I think that it's possible that he does end up having a good game with Kenny Pickett, even though this might seem like a tough matchup on paper.
Yeah, and the Bucs defense, they had I forget who they played against where they got the score run up on them. They got beat bad. Who was it? I forget. But the Bucs defense doesn't look like it did the first few weeks of the season. Needless to say. So I think that this is, even though it's a tough matchup, it's an upgraded matchup. The Chiefs. Yeah, okay, that's what it's. Chiefs. Who else but the Chiefs? But
of course.
So the Chiefs hung 41 on them. Now it's coming back to me. But this isn't the Bills defense in Buffalo. This is now a step down in defensive production, I think. A better matchup for Kenny Pickett and Diontae Johnson, and this time at home. I think Diontae Johnson has a chance to reestablish himself as a solid fantasy wide receiver after a couple of down weeks this week, even though it might be a little bit of catch up. They might be playing a little bit of catch up again with the Bucs. I think this is a better matchup for him, though.
Jacoby Myers made his way into the top 30 at number 28 this week after what he was able to do in his couple of healthy games this year. Very encouraging that he was able to do what he did with Bailey Zapp last week. So, I think you can continue to start him. I have DJ Moore here at 29. This is higher than I would have ranked him if Baker Mayfield was still under center. But PJ Walker is going to be out there this week, and he has received a 24% target share from PJ Walker when they've been on the field together. So let's hope that happens this week. Moore does run most of his perimeter routes on the left side, and that's where the Rams have been the most vulnerable this year. So maybe he has a good game this week. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. You can only cross your fingers and hope for the best.
What were we saying? What were we saying yesterday with these players? Like, I hope he scores.
Yeah, you said. I forgot. We said about someone.
I think it was Jeff Wilson.
Yeah, Jeff Wilson. I hope he scores. It's like you could say that about every single player. Oh, what's his name? Stephon Diggs. I hope he scores. Christian McCaffrey. I hope he scores. Yeah, you can say that about anybody. But nobody needs to have a score to really just lighten things up for their owners, fantasy managers, and DJ Moore. That's what it's been this whole season. It's just been sad. You see the talent. I don't know if you saw the one post. Someone said that DJ Moore needs to hold out at this point because he's just getting terrible QB play, and it's really just it's like throwing his whole career under the bus right now. It's terrible. And then going back, like you said about Jacoby Myers, he's actually averaging, I think, 17 points a game when he's on the field. So just a little nugget there. He's actually very good so far this season. And like you said, with Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi at quarterback. So regardless of who's starting there, it'll be fine.
I have Drake London here at 30, and I'm just praying, honestly. Like, it's not a great matchup for him, but his worst opponent is his head coach. So let's move on with that. Let's just move on to tight ends. It just gets me upset. I have Mark Andrews here at number 1. I have Kelsey at number 2. Buffalo held Mark Andrews to 2 catches for 15 yards in week 4. So that's why I don't have Kelsey at number 1 after his 4 touchdown performance last week. But I have Ertz at 3. Seattle has been terrible against tight ends. Now, let me ask you a question. If you had to choose between Kelsey and Andrews as being your tight end for the season, like who'd you rather have
for the whole season?
Yeah, like if you could choose, like, hey, I have Kelsey for this season or Andrews, like who would you rather have? Like right now, after 5 weeks,
I would have to go at this point right now, Travis Kelce. And that's just because, we saw, and, it's easy to say, oh, yeah, he has the upside after he just scored 4 touchdowns on 25 yards receiving. It's easy to say he has the upside that way. But I think that's what you have with Patrick Mahomes, a quarterback. Lamar Jackson can throw the ball, don't get me wrong. But Travis Kelce doesn't really put up duds. Sometimes Mark Andrews has duds. And Travis Kelce is clearly the number 1 in his offense. Mark Andrews is clearly number 1 in his offense too. But this is Travis Kelce being the number 1 in his offense that is completely, passing game geared, and Mark Andrews being the number 1 in his offense when it's based a lot around the run. It's like very minute, different things, like nuances separating the two. They're both very good, and you can make a case for either of them. But for me personally, I'd go Travis Kelce.
I get that. So Zach Ertz at number 3, and like I mentioned, the matchup is amazing for him. Dallas got us at 4. Tyler Higbee, at 5, he's going to get his targets like he does every week, against Carolina. It doesn't really matter the matchup, it seems like, at this point. David Njoku at number 6, he's been extremely solid over the last 3 weeks. 89 yards receiving, 73 yards receiving, and 88 yards receiving. And that's what you want to see from your tight end. The Patriots, they gave up a big game to Mark Andrews. They also ended up shutting TJ Hawkinson down last week. So like somewhere in between, hopefully David Njoku can do his thing. But as of right now, he's an every week tight end. Let me ask you this. Would you put David Njoku over Tyler Higbee in a full PPR league?
Not this week, I don't think.
Okay.
It's a tough matchup in New England. They're kind of going both ways with tight ends, but I look at David Njoku right now. He's a solid receiver. He's very good, but Tyler Higbee, I think if you talk about full PPR, Tyler Higbee's going to be catching passes, and he's just going to be catching passes. And he'll be catching passes after the game's over, from Matthew Stafford, just like Cooper Kupp's going to be. So I look at Tyler Higbee's matchup as much better than it was last week against Dallas. Carolina is not a very good team. I could see them going up. And Tyler Higbee, we talked about how he's not, like this supreme talent, but the volume is there enough that I think that Tyler Higbee is a better play this week than David Njoku. And because I said that now, David Njoku is going to go for like 3 touchdowns. So we'll see how it goes. But I think that Tyler Higbee is a better play this week.
I think so. I think he has one of the highest floors among these tight ends. George Kittle, he is improving super slowly, but he definitely slowly. He hasn't looked like the same George Kittle this year, right? Since coming back. Not looking great. Like 3 catches. He's averaging 3.7 catches for 33 yards this year. Not looking so good. Are you like looking at George Kittle? Like if you had George Kittle, are you trying to make improvements there? Or are you just hoping that he ends up, finding his way?
You have to hope. And I just attribute that completely to the field that you're working with. You're not going to be able to move George Kittle for any guy like Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce, Zach Ertz, Dallas Goedert. And I don't even consider Tyler Higbee in that group of guys that you're confident starting. Outside of that, like we said, it's just a complete crapshoot this season at tight end. So, maybe.
Let me ask you this. If you had George Kittle, would you add a little bit to that package and maybe trade for David Njoku or Tyler Higbee? Or are you hoping that Kittle eventually finds that ceiling and ends up being the guy?
Yeah, I'd hope that he eventually finds ceiling and is the guy. I think that George Kittle definitely has it in him. It's just been a weird year so far. The 49ers are off. The 49ers offense is operating under a very similar license as the Cowboys right now, just relying on a defense, and they don't have to put up a bunch of scores or yards. So maybe you could contribute. You could say game script is contributing a little bit for George Kittle. I like George Kittle still as a player. He's very talented. That's why I'm going to keep him on my team. I don't think the payoff is enough to go after a guy like David Njoku or Tyler Higbee, who really aren't that good in their own right. They're just kind of elevated right now because everyone else is down here. And by down here, I mean, you can't see if you're listening to the podcast right now, but everybody else is so much further below. There's so much disparity between the production outside the top 4 or 5 tight ends. I don't think it would be worth it to try and move up from him. I'd just keep him.
Taysom Hill is the upside play, right? I have him here at number 8. Expect either a 0 or a great game. And if you don't have a good tight end, just play Hill for the upside. And he'll be in there in quarterback packages and running back packages in the red zone, especially. I think with Jameis still kind of banged up, even if he does end up playing, it's possible that they still use Taysom Hill in some sort of capacity. Would you play Taysom Hill or George Kittle this week?
Taysom Hill.
Both. Taysom Hill. Okay.
I would say Taysom Hill because.
And is he the highest he would go here is 7 in front of George Kittle?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the highest I would put it. But I think that Taysom Hill, you look at the way these other tight ends are producing, and you think, okay, the only way they're going to produce is through the air. Taysom Hill, they're going to use him so many different ways. Like we saw it last week, the ceiling. And it's easy to rave about that. You can't expect it every week, but it might not be 3 touchdowns running and 1 touchdown passing, but it might be a touchdown running, a touchdown receiving, or a touchdown passing. He's good for a touchdown in a lot of games this season. So I think that, that kind of beats out what a lot of competition has to offer.
Yeah, I hear that, man. We have Pat Frymouth here at number 9. If he can clear concussion protocol, we'll get more word on that. But just keep in mind that he does have a bit of a concussion history. Gerald Everett is here at 10. He didn't come through last week, but it was, it really was his only week where he didn't come through. So it's possible that, he could find his footing again. Hayden Hurst, he came through last week. He's at number 11. And Irv Smith is at number 12. Irv Smith's route participation did go up to 70% this week. So if you're desperate at tight end, he might be available in your leagues. I think he's a better play this week than he was like a couple weeks ago because he wasn't getting that route participation.
Yeah, right. In order to produce, you have to, be running routes.
100%. You do. And a guy who has been running a ton of routes and has been getting a full route participation is Evan Ingram. Have him here at 13. And last week was really the first week he kind of came through. He did score touchdowns before, but like this was the first week where he was, really getting targeted. We'll see if that continues. I doubt it because Christian Kirk still didn't get his targets last week, and I would expect him to get them first. And then like you really have like the what the heck's like after this, right? It's like Dawson Knox at 14, followed by Robert Tonyan, Will Dissly, and like you mentioned, the matchup right against Arizona. If DK Metcalf is truly locked up in that game, and if they have, if they're double teaming him, it's possible that Dissly, it does open things up for Dissly, especially if Tyler Lockett is out in that game.
And Geno Smith has been targeting tight ends. Will Dissly's had touchdowns in a few games. Geno Smith likes throwing to him. So that's one thing that you don't really see on a stat sheet. But Geno Smith, he's looking early and often for Will Dissly. I think that's, worth noting. I might put him over Robert Tonyan if these were my rankings. But they're not. So
well, they can be, man. You can have some. You can have some of these rankings if you want, man. I'll share. I got no problem. You know what I'm saying?
Sure,
where do you want to put Dissly, bro? Where do you want to put him? You want to put him at 15?
I put him at 15. It's a very subtle change, but definitely
he's at 15 now. He's at 15 now.
Let it be known throughout the land. Let it be. He has moved one spot above Robert Tonyan in the Upper Hand Fantasy tight end rankings.
Hunter Henry, I have him here at 17. I'm going to put him over Robert Tonyan as well. So Robert Tonyan's down at 17. All right. Hunter Henry, he can be a pretty good play if Jonnu Smith ends up missing again this week. He had a near full route participation last week with Jonnu Smith missing. So keep an eye on that. Everybody is practicing for the Patriots on a limited basis. We have no idea who's going to play and who's not. So it's anybody's guess at this point. We have no idea if Jonnu Smith has a serious injury or not. We have no idea if Damian Harris has a serious injury or not, because they're all going to practice at some in some capacity. Bill Belichick has this down to a science. Like he knows what the minimum a player needs to do in order for them to count as being a limited participant. Cole Kmet played last night.
Did not get targeted very much. I think he had 3
No,
targets.
he did not. No, he
The
did
thing
not.
about Justin Fields throwing is, a lot of people had Cole Kmet as like the guy, like, oh yeah, he's going to be the guy for Justin Fields when he throws the ball. That hasn't really been the case. Justin Fields been targeting receivers, and that's about it. Very limited.
And it's
target share
amazing because
outside
his
of that.
receivers are trash. Like
Yeah.
outside of Darnell Mooney, like Dante Pettis,
Yeah, what's he
Velus
doing?
Jones. It's kind of hilarious to me that people thought Velus Jones was going to be good in the NFL. Like, and he
Yeah.
had that bad fumble on the special teams. And listen,
Mhm.
man, like when these like older wide receivers come in, like he was only 26 years old coming into the league, it's not going to work out. Okay, just
Yeah.
want to say that.
Yeah,
Anyway.
it's also worth noting, you talk about the receivers being really bad. It's like one of the St. Brown brothers. We know Amon St. Brown's very good. So how you got to feel if you're is it Equanimous St. Brown?
Yeah,
How
Equanimous.
you got to feel if you're buried on the depth chart in a team that doesn't pass the ball at all, and your brother's over there in Detroit.
All I know is that if I'm Equanimous, like I am doing whatever I can to like mimic exactly what Amon-Ra's training is. Like I'm gonna do
Yeah.
everything the same. I'm gonna try to get there. You know what I'm saying? Because
I think they're
your brother's doing it.
Yeah, I think they're built a little bit differently if you look at him on the field. I just
No,
look
it's
at
true.
the eye test. He's a little bit
Yeah.
bigger. I don't think that he's quite as fast. But I think that he could have a role in the offense. He should have a role over Velus Jones or whatever. And Dante Pettis, I don't know what the heck that is. He's been a journeyman. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm just looking at that. Justin Fields hyper targeting receivers. And he might, and this is completely off topic, but with Justin Fields, he's actually looked fantasy relevant the past 2 weeks. So you might be able, if anybody panic dropped him, you might be able to just like pick him up on the low.
Who are we talking about right now? Justin Fields?
Justin Fields, yeah. Because a lot of people, yeah.
I love how you brought it back to Justin Fields. I know you have him on this roster, but it's okay, man. Like it doesn't mean that he's gonna be good this year. Okay. No, I'm just kidding.
I think I was the one. I think I called him. Was it him or someone else? I think it was Justin Fields that I called this year's Jalen Hurts. Obviously, this hasn't been the case so far, but if he could throw it a little bit and look a little bit better, I think that he has the capability to have that similar type of production. It just hasn't shown up yet. He's a little banged up now too. I think.
I'm a big dude. I'm a fan of Justin Fields, man. I want him to do well. I'm rooting for the guy. I just feel like he's in a terrible situation right now, and just like looking at him on the field. He's just so sad. Like after every like bad throw or like every like drop pass, or he's just like sad. And it's like, and even after the game, he's just like, I'm tired of like sucking. That's basically what he said. And I'm tired of coming in last.
With the thing with Justin Fields, they were talking about on the broadcast last night that like he does this yoga thing where he breathes in and out to like keep himself calm, I guess. And they showed him on the sideline doing that. It's like, man, things are really just real right now in Chicago.
Seriously, man, like the man has to do yoga on the field and do breath work in order for him to stay calm.
Right. Well, the other thing too was funny because if you watch the broadcast last night, they had every time they cut to Justin Fields after a play, he'd be down on the ground just like.
That's exactly
like he was just like hurting. You could tell
he was hurting, man. He was, and after the game, he said, "I'm hurting pretty bad."
Yeah.
Just want to quickly say Cameron Brate, he should be back this week. And then Mo Alley Cox, I have him at number 20. But Cameron Brate could be a pickup, if you're desperate at tight end, because Tom Brady was targeting him before he got hurt. Before the 2 weeks he got hurt before. So just wanted to bring that up. But that's it. That's all we got, guys. We'll just stay up to date with my Instagram stories. I should be going over if anything pops up over the next day or two. There's not a whole lot of injuries going into this week in terms of like what we know and what we don't know. We know for the most part most of the stuff that's happening, unless some guys end up popping up on the injury report today. But other than that, it's not a big injury week. So we'll see what happens going into the weekend. But stay up to date with my Instagram, Upper Hand Fantasy. If you want my full rankings, go to patreon.com/upperhandfantasy, and you'll be able to get the full rankings there, including flex rankings. That's going to be going up later today. But yeah, I think we're good, guys. Appreciate you. Have a great weekend, and good luck this week. I'll be going live on Instagram starting at 10:30 a.m. Eastern time, and I'll be going live all the way up until 12:30 for 2 hours on my Instagram. So we'll see you guys soon. Take it easy. Peace.